Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this amazing tutorial in my opinion because it is a topic that I really like, and I did create a tutorial on this in the past. However, the library which we're going to be using, socketio, had an update, which means that the code for that video is completely broken. So for that reason, I really wanted to create this video again, and I'm actually going to add a lot more stuff to this tutorial, which I'm really excited for. And yeah, that's basically it. So this is what we're going to be building. It's a chat app using React, Node, Express, and we're going to be using socketio as the WebSocket library that allows us to send our data through WebSockets. So you can see over here, we have a cool interface. I didn't write all of the CSS. I did write some of the CSS, but I didn't write all of it. I'm going to leave the link for where I got the CSS from, but I'm also going to leave the link for the whole code. So I'm not going to be talking about CSS throughout this video. I'm actually just going to copy and paste my CSS because it's not the focus of the video. And if you're interested in just going over and copy and pasting as well, the code for it is going to be in the description. So you can see we can basically send messages to each other. These are two different people. Imagine they are in different computers. And I can just come over here and say something like, hey, what's up? And both will receive. You can see that this one also received. It is supposed to auto scroll. So for example, if I come over here and say, hey, you see both of them auto scroll down when they receive a new message. This is a new message. And there's much more that we can add to this, which I'm probably going to add in the next video. But this is going to be a single video where I'm going to teach how to build this whole thing. And if we have any other features I might add, I'm just going to add them later on in the next video. So before we get into the video, if you guys could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it. It would help push my videos to more people, and I would be massively grateful if you guys could do that. I'm putting a lot of effort into my videos, so if you guys could just leave a like, subscribe if you're not subscribed, you guys have no idea, it would help me a lot. So that's basically it. Now let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so to start off, I opened up here a folder inside of my VS Code, and we're gonna start by very simply just creating a folder for both the front end and the back end. We're gonna separate both of them into different folders so that we can keep it organized. And the back end, or the front end, is gonna be called client, and the back end is going to be called server. Those are the two folders that we're gonna create. And one thing I want to note is we're going to start off with working with the backend. So I'm going to open up my terminal over here, and I'm going to change my directory to inside of the server folder. So I'm going to say cd server, and now you can see I'm inside of the server folder. And what I want to do inside of the server folder is I just want to run, create a very simple package.json file to start off our backend. So to do that, I'm just going to run npm init, and when I press enter, you should see it should start asking a bunch of questions. You just press enter to all of them, and at the end, it should create a package.json inside of our server folder. Now there are a few things we need to install in order to make our backend run. The first thing I want to install is Express. So I'm going to say npm I for install, then say Express like this. Then I want to install Node1, which is a library which allows you to just develop faster by whenever you make any changes, it will automatically restart your server, which is an amazing thing, and it's going to help out throughout the video. And then what we want to install is the socket.io library, which is the library we're going to be using to handle everything related to WebSockets. And then finally, we're going to install Course, which is a library which helps you figure out and resolve a bunch of issues with your connections. So I would highly recommend having Course because it will help you out a lot, especially like preventing you from having to deal with annoying bugs. So while it installs for us, let's just come over here and open up an index.js file. And this file over here is where we're going to have our entry point to our server. So where we actually just write our stuff and have the whole code for our server. We're only going to be using one single file for this whole application. But the reason why I installed Express is because I know that many of you guys will want to use Express and know how to configure socketio with Express. So that's why I'm using it, but I won't be using like anything related to Express throughout this application. It's just so that I can show you guys how to set up with Express. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta first of all create a variable called Express and set it equal to require Express like this. Then we want to come over here, create a app variable and set it equal to an instance of the Express function, as you can see over here. And then what we want is we want to start off by creating, grabbing a variable called HTTP from the HTTP library that already exists inside of any Node.js application, as you can see. And the reason why we need this is because we need this to build our server together with socketio. And now that we have the app over here, what I want to do is I also want to require cores and set it equal to require the cores library. And this is extremely important with socketio because socketio deals with a lot of cores issues. So if you're watching this video, maybe you're dealing right now with a problem related to cores, and I'm going to show you guys how to resolve it, but it has a lot of issues with it. So if you don't import the cores library, it's probably going to cause a bunch of problems for you. So I'm just going to say app.use, and I'm going to use the cores middleware, which is going to resolve many of those issues that I mentioned previously. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a variable called server. And this variable is going to be using the HTTP library, and we can use a function called createServer where we just pass an Express app inside of here and it should generate the server for us. So what we can do now is we can come down here at the bottom and just say server.listen and literally just pass in here a port to which we want to listen to. So for example, port 3001 is the one I like to use because React will be running on port 3000. And then I'll just come over here and I'll just pass a callback function that whenever the server actually runs, it's going to come over here and just console log a message saying something like server running. I don't know, something like that. Now we can test to see if this is technically working right now by running our application in our terminal. One thing I want to point out is we want to use Node1 to restart our app every time we make any changes. So I'm going to come here to our package.json and I'm going to add a script to here, and it's going to be the start script. And I'm just going to say that whenever you run npm start, we want to run the command in our terminal called node1 and the name of the file we created. So mine is index.js, so I'm just going to say node1 index.js. So now if I come over here and say npm start, you should see that it will start, and it says server running because it is actually working. Now is the part where we start dealing with everything related to socketio. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come up here and I want to just import from the socketio library. So I'm going to say require from socket.io like this. And what I want to import is actually an interface, a class called server, which comes from the socketio library. So you need to use the curly braces over here to import this because it is something existent inside of the socketio library. And then what I want to do is I want to instantiate this this server by creating something called an IO. It's just the name of the variable we're going to be using. It is the connection that we're going to be establishing, and we're going to set this equal to a new instance of this server class that we just imported from socketio. And over here is one of the most important parts. We need to pass first the server which we created, which is this over here. So we need to actually put this above this because we need to pass the server just to say that we want to connect our socketio server with the Express one that we created. And then here's the important thing, because if you're dealing with cores issues, you can solve them by coming over here, adding an object at the end of this, and this object will take in one thing called cores. It's the key, and cores you can specify some of the credentials and some of the settings you want to have related to cores in your socketio server. So for us, what we want is we want to first of all set up an origin. And what is an origin? It's basically telling our server which like URL, which server is going to be calling and making the calls to our socketio server. So if we really think about it, what exactly is the server that's going to be doing that? It is the React server that is going to be running. So we just put the URL to where our React application will be running. And in our case, since we're running in our local host, we just put here the local host for React, which is this over here. We just put localhost, and React will be running on port 3000. So we put 3000 over here just to tell socketio that it is okay to accept socket communication with this specific URL over here. And also we can specify stuff like which methods we accept. So for example, if you have any issues with like making some sort of requests, you can come over here and specify that you accept GET requests or I don't know, POST requests, and it will only accept those kind of methods. So this is basically the explanation for resolving some of the core issues that might come with socketio. If this helped you out, I'm happy because I remember spending a lot of time trying to figure this out in the past after the update of the library. So this is basically what I wanted to mention. But now that we have this IO variable over here, we can actually start working with actual socketio code. And how does socketio actually works? Well, over here, what we can do is we can call this IO variable, and we can actually just initiate and detect if someone connected to this socketio server. So basically how socketio works is based on events. So you emit an event and you detect, you listen for an event to happen, right? And there's some certain events that are already built into socketio. So for example, the connection event is one that detects if someone connected to the socketio server. So when we say something like io.on, it means we're listening for this for an event with this ID or this name over here. And every piece of code that we write for socketio will be inside of this, because you should only be listening to events if the user has actually connected to the server. And when you listen for the events, you always enact some sort of action as a callback function. So what we do is whenever someone connects, we call this callback function, and we can grab one important thing from it, which is the actual, we call it socket, but it's what we're going to be using to specify like events and listening events for whichever user connected to here. So we can even access information. Each user gets a specific ID when they connect to the socket server. So I can do something like console.log socket.id like this, and it should console log the ID. Right now we can't do anything because we aren't like actually connecting to the server. We don't have the front end yet, but we'll see what happens when we create our front end. You'll see that whenever someone opens the website and it connects, they will have like it will console log the ID over here. So I'm just gonna leave it like this so that we can see this in the future. So one thing we also need to that is also built into socketio is being able to disconnect from your server, right? So we do need to, at the end of our connection, add a listening event, an event called disconnect like this, and we pass here as well a callback function which should run whenever someone tries to disconnect. And disconnecting is basically just like leaving like closing the tab, or actually disconnecting from the server, and it will detect when this happens. And we're just gonna say something like I'm gonna say like user disconnected, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna pass the socket ID so we know which user disconnected from the server. And for now, I'm just gonna do this for the server because in order for you to understand the rest, we need to start building our front end. So right now we created our backend technically, and we're listening for events in our socketio server, which is pretty good. It should be working perfectly. But now what we want to do is we want to start up working with our front end. So I'm going to create a new terminal over here, and I'm just going to navigate towards the client folder, similar to what we did with the server. You can see we are inside of the client folder now. And what I want to do is I just want to say npx create React app, and then put a dot over here, meaning that I want to create my React application inside of the client folder. So while this is installing, let's just leave it there. I'll be back in a second when it finishes. Okay, so as you can see over here, our React app was created, and I'm just going to close this real quick so that we can focus completely on our front end. So what I like to do with every React application, as many of you might know, is I like to just delete like the unnecessary files. So the app.test, the index.css, and the setup test and the logo, I'll just delete all 4 of them. And since I deleted the index.css, I need to come to the index.js file and just delete the index.css import from the top over here. And then finally, I'll just come to our app.js and I'll just delete everything that is over here because we technically don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to delete this over here and let's just run our React app. You'll see that when I click npm start, it should open up. I'll create a window over here that should like open up our localhost. But you can see that it is an empty website, which means we don't have anything right now. But if we do write something like this, it should actually show it in our screen. Now, what I want to do is I want to first of all try to establish a connection to our socketio server. I mentioned before that when someone enters the website, it should console log here in our backend the ID of that user. So we want to really try to make this happen. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to install a library in React which allows us to connect to socketio. This library is used not only React, it's used in any kind of frontend that you want to connect with socketio. And to do that, I'll just change my directory back to client like this. And I'm just going to say npm install. And then I'm going to run socket.io slash, not slash, like a dash, like this, client. This is the name of the library. I'm going to open this up so you guys can see it clearly. This is the name of the library we're going to be using to make this work. I should see that when I press enter, it should start installing the library. And this library will allow us to come over here to our app.js and call an instance of it by basically coming here at the top at a highest level like app component and just saying something like import io from the socketio client library. IO, similar to what we did before, is going to be used to establish a connection. So I like to establish this connection outside of the component, like over here at the top. And I'm just going to say const socket equals to io.connect. And the important thing is we need to put over here, and we put here the link to like the URL of where we're running our socketio server. So in our case, it will be http://localhost 3001, similar to what we did with in our backend. We connected it to our frontend. Now we're connecting our frontend to our backend. And when we create this socket variable over here, we can do many things with it. The first one is we can actually now test to see if it's working, right? I'm gonna open up my server, and you can see it's already console logging. But if I open up over here our server file and I say something like instead of just socket ID, I'm gonna put like a backticks over here and just say something like user connected, and then just display the user that was connected by using the money sign, the curly braces in JavaScript. And you can see that whenever someone refreshes the page over here, it should log in and console log. You saw because I refreshed, it disconnected, but then connected again, and the ID is always random for each person. So it means we are actually connecting and everything is working perfectly. If this is not working for you, you probably have a bug. If you want to just like leave a comment down below, I'll be helping everyone. So over here, now that this connection is established, everything is perfect, let's take a look at our front end. And I want to do something. Well, in my actual app, the one I showed in the beginning, to connect between two people and only the two of them are talking to each other, no one can just walk into the room. Basically what I did is I created a little interface over here. I added like an H3 tag, I think, or an H4. And then I just said something like join a chat, like this. Then I added 2 inputs. One input will be for your name, so your username. So let me just say input of type text, and I want to just have here a placeholder like this, and the placeholder will say something like John as like an example, right? And then we also want to have another input, which is basically for now a placeholder for our room. So we want to have a chat between two people, right? In order to have a chat between two people, we need to make sure that both of them are in the same room. And a room is something in socketio, which is basically where you're broadcasting your image, your data, your messages. So if I send a message to a room, which has a specific ID, only the people who have joined that room will see that message. So that's kind of the idea here. We want to have the both of them in the same room. So for now, since this is not like a real, like an app where it's like WhatsApp, we're letting the user write the name of their room, and whoever wants to join their room, just write the same name and they will be able to join. Maybe in the next video, I'll be showing you guys how to automatically generate a room and have two people talk to each other. But over here, I'll just say something like room ID, and this will be where you write the ID of the room. You can see this is how it looks right now, and we're just gonna add finally a button like this, which is just gonna say join a room or a chat. Let's just say room, join a room. Now I do want to come over here and I want to create a state which is going to represent your username, like this one over here, and one that is going to represent your room. So I'm going to say const equals to use state like this, and it's going to automatically import from React, and for the state it's going to be a string, and let's call this username, and the function to mutate it will be set username. And we're going to do the same thing for the room. So we're going to come over here and say const room and set room. And it will also be a string. And one thing we want to have is a function to join a room whenever you click on this button. So I'm going to say const join room like this. And this function will do a lot of stuff, but primarily it will establish the connection between the user who logged in, who just like entered this web app, and the socketio room that they want to enter. So the way we do this is we want to first alter the values of the username state and the room state to be equal to whatever we write on this input. And to do that, it's pretty simple. We come to the input. So this one is for the username. I give it an on change like this, and I just can come over here, put an equal sign, grab the event that is happening at every change inside of this input, and basically what I want to do is I just want to set username to be equal to event.target.value. So target.value is just accessing the value of the input, so whatever is currently written inside of the input. If I write John over here, then the target.value will be John. And what we're doing is whenever there's any single change inside of this input, we're changing the username state to be equal to the current value. So we're keeping track of whatever is written in the input. And we'll do the same thing for the room. I'm just going to come over here, but instead of set username, it would be set room because it's the name of the state. Now we come over here to our join room function, and the first thing we want to check is if we only want to be able to join a room if, first of all, the username is not empty. So if username is not equal to an empty string, and if room is not equal to an empty string as well. So something like this. And this is the only two conditions where we're going to allow them to join the room, because we don't want someone to join a room without a username, and especially without a room. So, oh, I forgot to put another equal sign over here. So how do we join a room, right? This is the first time we're going to actually emit an event in socketio from our front end. Well, to do that, we need to first create an event in socketio, like in our backend, which determines when someone wants to join a room. So to do that, I'll just come over here. I'll say socket, and I'll declare an event by saying on. So whenever someone emits an event with the name, let's call it join room, like this, we want to basically say socket.join, which is a function in socketio, and we want to join based on the ID of the room that they entered in the front end. But how do we do this? We have the room ID or the room string or whatever, the room name that they sent in the front end, but how do we send it back to the backend? Well, when you create an event like this one by saying socket.on and giving it a name, you can actually pass stuff as data. So I can just say data over here, and I can pass through the front end the room ID through this variable called data, and I can just say socket.join data. And it should recognize. But in order for us to know that this is actually the ID and not some other data, we need to pass it here in the front end. So in order to emit this event over here. In the front end, we just say socket.emit, and we can emit an event by just passing the name, so join room, and we need to pass the data as I mentioned. So to pass the data, we just pass it over here. So I just passed the room as the second argument to this emit function, and this is what is going to be received here in this function as data. So we're just saying we want to join the room that we sent in the front end. And after that, I just want to console log a message saying something like user. Actually, I need to put it inside of the backticks. So user with ID equal to the ID of the user. So let's just grab the ID of the user over here by saying socket.id joined room, and then I'm gonna put the ID of the room. But what is the ID of the room? As I mentioned before, it is just the data that we grabbed from the front end. So I'm gonna say data. Now let's see if this is working, right? We have a bunch of user connected and user disconnected in our console log because we keep refreshing our page. But let's come over here and let's refresh our page again. Did I actually no, yeah, I need to pass this button as an on click like this, and I'll just say something like on click. I just want to call the join room function. Now let's take a look. If I come over here to this function over here and I just write my name, Pedro, and I put an ID, let's call this 123 Pedro room, whatever, and I click join a room, what we should see is the user with ID this join the room 123 Pedro room, which is good because it means we're actually connecting to the room, we're actually recognizing it, we're actually sending data from the front end to the back end. And the good thing is, if you're not aware of like how the importance of socketio, why it is a lot better, like it is better for certain circumstances than using something like HTTP. If I come here to my network tab and I change the room and put whatever, you shouldn't see, there's no HTTP request being made, but we are sending data from the front end to the back end. This is one of the beauties of socketio, and it is one of the most important parts of it and why we use it for stuff like real-time chats. Now, this over here is fine. We now are able to join a room, which is amazing. But now let's start building our chats, which is the most important part. So to build the chats, I'm going to create a component over here called chats.js, like this. And I'm going to create the component by just using my snippet rfce, and it should generate my chat component. Now, one thing I want to point out is that in the chat component is where we're going to be sending messages and receiving messages through socketio. So we do need to pass this socket variable that we created over here in our app component as props to our chat component. So I'm going to say that this component accepts a prop called socket, and inside of here in our app component, I'm going to actually down here at the bottom call our chat component like this, and I need to pass socket as a prop by just saying socket equals to socket. And not only that, but we might also want to keep track of the username of the user. So like the username that logged in, because we need to have that in the message. If you remember in the beginning of the video, it shows which user sends which message. And we also need to keep track of the room in which the user is currently participating in. So to do that, we'll do the same thing. I'll just pass username over here, and I'll set it equal to username. And I'll do the same thing for the room. I'll set it equal to room. And now when I save this, nothing happens because we didn't create our chat yet. But to do that, we're going to come here to our chat.js and we're going to start building the UI for it. Now, the UI is going to be a little bit annoying just because it is annoying, and I'm not going to be focusing on CSS. I'm not even going to add the class names for each stuff yet. I'm going to cut and show you guys the class names for it and the CSS after I edit, but I'm going to build the UI as like a little explanation of why I'm doing certain things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have this div over here, which is going to encompass the whole chat. Then I want to divide our chat into 3 divs. One is going to be, actually I'll just add the class name. So the first one is going to be the chat header, just so you guys have an idea. Then we're going to also have the chat body and the chat footer. So I'm going to say chat body and chat footer like this. And the header obviously will be the header of the chat. The body will be where the messages appear, and the footer is where it's gonna have like the inputs and the buttons to write and send the messages. Now for the header, all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a paragraph tag and say something like live chat, because if you recall in the beginning of the video, we had this little thing saying that it is a live chat. I just think it looks nice. Then for the body, we're gonna leave this for a second because we don't have any messages yet. But I'm going to show you guys how to build the UI for the messages as well. Let's just focus on the footer for now. And for the footer, what we do is we first add an input over here, which is going to be the input where we write our messages. So I'm just going to give this a type of text like this, and a placeholder, maybe just say something like, hey, just as a message. And then I want to add a button, which for now is not going to do anything because we're not going to give it an on click yet, but I put a little arrow, if you guys recall the beginning of the video, and that arrow is not an icon, it's not like anything related to that. It's actually just an HTML symbol, and the code for that symbol is the following. Yeah, it's this thing over here. I just had to look because I didn't memorize, but this should be the code for a symbol, which is like a little arrow in the screen. And you can see this is how it looks, right? It does look ugly right now because we haven't put any CSS yet, but you can see we have a little input and we have our little button over here as well. Now what we want to do is we want to start just displaying just trying to emit and send messages to someone. So how should we do this? How can we send a message to someone in our room? Well, the first thing we got to do is we got to keep track of the value of our input, just because we want to know what the message is. So I'm going to create a state over here and call it use message, not use message. I'm going to call it current message, like this, current message. And we're going to set the current message as the function that is going to mutate our state. And this should be a string because the message should be a string. And then to alter this, we're going to do something very similar to what we did over here. We're going to copy the onChange for this input, and we're going to paste it on this input over here. And whenever this input changes, we want to set the current message to be equal to the event.target.value. Now what we do is we need to create a function that is going to be called whenever you click on this button. So I'm going to come here at the top, and I'm going to just say const send message, might be a good name for this function. And I want to basically just write the logic over here that is going to allow us to send messages through our socket server. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to ask if the current message is empty, because if it is empty, I don't want to continue. So if current message is not equal to an empty string, then we want to continue and actually send a message. We don't want to be able to send empty messages. I don't think any website which has messages like chat systems allow you to do this. Now, one thing I want to point out is, if you recall in the beginning of the video, the chat messages that I sent included like a few pieces of information. The first piece of information is the actual message. So like if I write, hey, what's up? It would actually keep track of that. It also included the name of the user who sent the message, and it also included the time in which they sent that message, which is something that I find really cool. So in order to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an object over here called message data, and this object will contain all of that information because we're gonna then send this object to our socket server. And the first thing we want to keep track of is, first of all, the room in which we are sending the message, just because we want to know which room we want to send the message to. And the room will be equal to the room that we got at the top here from our prop. Then I want to send the username for the author of this. I'm not going to call it username. I'm going to call it author, and send it set it equal to username like this. So that's the author of the message. And then we want to send the actual message and set it equal to current message like this. And finally, we want to send the time in which the message was sent. And I know that kind of seems kind of hard, but it's pretty easy with JavaScript. We basically just want to send a time which is a format like the hour and the minute, right? So what we do is we basically say new date, and the date we put inside of here is date dot now, like this, which is a function in JavaScript, which basically means that we're getting the current date, and then at the end we can just say dot get hours, which will just return the two, like the hour, whichever hour you send this message. So if I send this message 11 a.m., it will this should represent 11. And then we want to unite this by a colon, and the same thing, but instead of get hours, we want to use get minutes, like this, and it should do the same thing but with the minutes, and just create this cool little date format of whatever time you sent the message. And one thing I want to do is I want to make this function asynchronous so that we actually wait for the message to be sent to update our, to actually update our array, because this is important to understand. We want to wait for this to be done for us to continue moving forward. So what we need to do here is we need to emit a socket message and send this information through it. So how do we create a socketio event that we can emit to send this data? Well, we go to our server and we can just come over here and say socket.on, and we create an event called I don't know, send message, like this, and it will accept data again, and the callback function will handle actually sending the data. Well, the data we're going to receive is this message content over here, right? This information. So now that we created this, what we can do is we can come over here and we can say await socket.emit, like this, and we just pass the actual name, which is send message, and finally we pass next to it the data that we want to send to our socket server, which is the message data object that we created over here. And this should work perfectly. We should be receiving it over here. If I console log this, you'll see that I'm console logging the data. We should be receiving this. Let me just open up my terminal and let me, I don't know, just write something like Pedro. My room ID would be 123. I'm going to join a room. So you'll see that it will show that I joined the room. And now I want to send a message. Hey, what's up? And when I click on this, you should see that nothing happened because we actually haven't said that whenever you click on the button, we want to call the send message function. So I'll just paste it over here. And let's open it up again, and let's try again. If I write something, we should see it over here. You saw that it actually sent the data to our server, and it contains all the information we need, including the room, the author, the message, and the time. Now, how do we actually do something with the data that we received with the message? How do we send the message that a user just sent to another user? Well, now everything we've been doing is we've been listening to socketio events in the backend, right? And we haven't really been emitting anything from the backend to the frontend. Well, now we'll do it differently. We're actually going to listen to an event in the frontend, which is going to listen to any messages that they receive, and we're going to emit those messages from our backend. So what we do is we go to our frontend, which is going to be in our chat.js, and I'm going to create a use effect down here, which it's going to listen whenever there's any changes to our socket, right? It's going to listen every time it receives another message. So we'll just say that it should call the function inside of here whenever there's a change in our socket server. So what we want to do over here is we want to say socket.on, meaning that we want to listen to an event, and the event we want to listen to is, let's call it receive message, like this, and over here we'll put a callback function that will determine what we want to do whenever we receive this message. And similar to how we've been listening to events in our backend, we can grab the data that we're going to send from our backend to our frontend. So I'll say data over here. And how do we actually emit from our backend to this event that we just created? Well, we can come over here to our send message event, and we can say socket.emit the data, and we need to pass as well the name of the event, which is receive message, like this, receive message. And the important thing is that we have a room, right? And we only want to emit this message to whoever is in that room. So how do we do that in socketio? Well, all we have to do is we just have to specify over here by saying socket.to, and we have to specify the ID of the room that we want to send and emit this message. So for us, it will be data.room, which we got the room ID from the data that we're sending over here. If you recall, we're sending the room. So what we're doing is whenever someone types a message, they emit the send message event and send the data. Then in the send message event, it will emit the message that you just sent to everyone who is listening for new messages. So all the other users in the same chat as you. So now that we have this, let's check to see if it's actually working. Let's just console log over here the data of whichever message we sent. And if we come over here, I'm actually going to open this up over here again. I'm just going to open a new Chrome tab. I'm going to also log into the local host. It's two different tabs. Let me refresh both of them. And I'm going to inspect element for both of them and open the console so you guys can see it. Let's see like what it's consoled. Let me do the same for this one over here. And what we do is we first of all write a name, so Pedro, and I want to go to room ID 123, and I want to join this room. So I just joined this room, and now John over here should join the same room. So I'm gonna say 123. It should be the same room. So join a room. Now, if I write a message over here saying, hey, this, like the John chat should receive that message in console log over here. And as you can see, it actually does. And it receives like the whole message with information and everything. And if John writes a message saying, I'm good, what about you? Then I click this, then Pedro should be receiving as well. And it's not like you're emitting to other people, but yourself, which kind of makes sense, right? So this is one of the good things. It is working perfectly, and I can emit how many messages I want. So now that we know that this is technically working, let's start adding some CSS, because this looks really ugly. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add all of the CSS inside of this app.css file, which by the way, I'm going to delete all the CSS that is already over here. If you want to follow along and do the same thing, remember the code is all in the description. Just copy and paste the code. CSS isn't really that important. So the important part is understanding how socketio works and how to integrate it with React. So if you want to do it like this, just copy and paste the code, and you should have it similar to how I will have it in a second. So I'll be back in a second with all of the CSS pasted. Okay everyone, so I'm back and I actually pasted all the CSS as you can see over here. Again, just check out in the description and all the CSS will be there. One thing I did as well is I came here to our app.js component and I wrapped the inputs and the h3 tag with a div with a class name of join chat container like this. So all you have to do if you're doing this is you just wrap the buttons, the inputs, and the h3 with this div that I just created. Now you can see this is how it looks. It looks okay. We have here our chat. Now this inputs look a little bit better, and we can click on join a room and the chat is over here. Now the chat isn't really apparent right now because of one reason: we haven't actually added some of the UI aspects to it. So for example, over here, what I want to do is I want to add a class name to this div, and the class name I want to give is chat window like this. And when I save it, you should see that we should have our beautiful chat window over here. None of the messages really work right now. I can try to send a message and nothing will happen. It will only like console log like I showed you guys previously. However, the first thing I want to do now is I only want to show the chat if we have joined the room. So to do that, I would just come over here. I'll go to our app.js and I want to create a boolean, which is a state at the top over here, which will just basically determine if we want to show the chat or not. So I'm going to say show chat and set show chat like this. It is a boolean and it will start as false. And to make this work, I'll just actually come over here and I'll just ask a question, right? I only want to show this chat if the show chat is equal to true. While it's equal to false, I want to show this over here. So I'll just come over here, open some JavaScript and write if show chat is, if not show chat, so if it's equal to false, then we want to show all of this. But if it's equal to true, we put a colon over here and it should display the correct information. Now what I'll do is I'll just put a like a parentheses around this, and it should encompass everything. And I'll also put a parentheses over like around this one over here, and it should work as well. Now we should close it with a curly brace, and if we save it, it should rearrange. And basically what we're doing is, if show chat is equal to false, then show just the chat, like you're seeing over here. And if it becomes true, then we only want to show the actual chat window. So how do we determine that it will become true? If I come over here and write Pedro, and I try to go to room 123. Right now, nothing is happening. You are joining the room, but it's not working. So how you do that is you just come over here, and after you join the room, you just set show chat to be equal to true, like this. And if we save this, you should see that if I refresh my page and I try to join another room, like this, Pedro, and I come over here and I put room 123, now it shows the chat. But again, the messages aren't really appearing on our screen, so how do we show the messages as they come to our screen? Well, to do that, the first thing we need to do is we have to create a state inside of our chat, which is going to represent the list of messages coming into your chat. So let's just come over here. I'm going to copy this over here. Let's call this message list, and this should be set message list. And it should be like an array, right? So we'll just pass an empty array over here. And what we want is, whenever we receive a message, we don't want just to console log that message. Instead, we want to set message list like this. And the message list we're going to set is, we're going to first grab the current state of message list. So like, what is the current previous message list? And I'll just call this, I don't know, list. And then we want to turn this into the same list as before, but at the end we want to add the new message that we just received. So whenever this event is listened, so whenever someone emits a message event and we listen to it, it's going to set the message list state to be equal to whatever list it was before, but at the end we're going to add the new message that just arrived. Now, if you want to see how this works, let's just come over here into our chat body. And for now, let's just loop through this message list, right? Let's say message list.map, and let's loop through it. Pretty simple. We'll just create a function inside of here, and let's just close this. And for each element in the message list, let's just return an h1 saying something like the actual message. So if you recall, each message should be over here. So we'll just grab the message content. Let's call it message content. And for each message, I just want to display the message content dot message, because that's the format of the message that we are sending from our backend, right? If you recall, we are sending back the data that we sent in the front end. And if we go to our chat in the send message, like send message function, this is the format. It's an object containing a room, an author, a message, and a time. So we're looping through that, and over here, we're just displaying the message of each data that it contains inside of and we're just displaying the message of each event that it receives from our socket server. Now, let's test to see if this is working. I'll refresh this over here. We have two of them. Let's go into the same room. I'm going to say Pedro over here, and over here, I'm going to put 123 as the room ID. Let's join it. Then over here, let me go in as John, and let's put the room ID as 123. Now, if I send a message from Pedro and say, hey, now we should at least see hey appearing here in our screen. And if I click on this, that's exactly what happens. I can send more like, what's up? And it should also appear there. And if I click from this one over here and say, please subscribe, like this, you should see that it appears in the other screen as well. Now, this is working perfectly. It means you can see the messages are being broadcasted and emitted to the other user. But one point that is important to understand is, if I send a message from this one, I also want not only for the message to appear on theirs, but to also appear on mine, right? Because I want to see my own messages as well. So to do that is very simple. All we do is we also set the message list not only when we receive a message from someone else, but also when we emit our own message. So after we send a message, we want to add that message as part of our list. So you can see that now, if I come over here and I say, if I send this, not only it goes to them, but it also goes to us as well. Now, what do we want to do? This is kind of almost working. The only problem is that our chats are kind of looking kind of ugly. The CSS that I just pasted and that you guys should have pasted as well already includes all of the CSS for that. So the only thing we need to do is build the HTML, so the UI for the message body. And the message body is going to be pretty simple. What we're going to be doing is we're going to have here a div. So for each message, we're gonna create a div like this, and the class name for this div will be just message like this. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another div over here, and let me just close this div again like this. Let me save it. And inside of this div, we're gonna divide our message into two things. The first one is the actual message, so like the actual message that you wrote, and the other one is it's called like the meta of the message, so like the time in which it was sent and also the user who sent the message. So to do that, I'm going to create two divs inside of here. One is going to be called it's going to have an ID of not an ID but a class name of message content. So class name, I'll just say message content like this, and then the other one is going to be pretty similar, but it's going to say message meta as the class name. And then what we do is inside of here we basically just add a p tag. So we'll add a paragraph tag like this, and over here we'll just display the message content dot message to see the message, right? And then for our meta, we're gonna come over here and we're gonna have two p tags, so two paragraph tags. One is going to display the time and the other is going to display the author. So the first one is going to display the time. I'll just copy this over here and say message content.time, and the other one should display the author, so message content.author. And if I save this, and if you guys see it over here, let me just open up the other one. Let's join to the same room. I'll put Pedro, and I'll just put the room, I don't know, 1, just to keep it simple. I'll join as John and room 1 as well. If I send a message over here, hey, what's up, you should see that the message actually looks semi-okay. I know it kind of looks kind of weird, and both of them are in the same side, which is something that I didn't have in the other, like in the beginning, because we really want to show, like, if it's my message, I want to be on the left side. If it's someone else's message, I want to see it on the right side. I also changed the color based on whoever sent the message, but you can see that the messages at least look semi-okay, right? So in order to fix that and allow you to have different, like one message, the message that is from you be on the left side and the message that it is from the other person be on the right side, you have to identify who sent the message, right? So we're currently seeing who is logged into this chat. By going to our props, we see that the username is username. So what we can do is, inside of our message div over here, we can just put an ID to it, and the ID will be the following. If the username that is currently in the chat is equal to the username from the message, so we can say message content.author like this, then we know for a fact that it is you who sent the message. So we can put a question mark and just put an ID of you, something like this. But if it's not, you know it's another person, so we can put it like an ID of other or something like that. And now we can access that in the CSS by accessing the IDs other and you, which is something that I did over here. And if you pasted the code, you should see that this is kind of how I separated them. And you should see that now it works perfectly because it recognizes who is the author and who isn't the author of the message. And if it is you, your message should appear in the left, and if it is another person, it should appear in the right. Now, one thing I also did is I also added an ID for the time and the author just to give it some styling. And if you're interested in having the same style as I did, you can just come over here and call this time. And you can also just come over here and call this author like this. And my CSS code will already handle it. You can see our names are in bold and our time are kind of separated. And it looks pretty nice, right? One thing I want to point out is that if I come over here to the chat and I write, I don't know, hey, and I press enter, it doesn't work. But if I click on the button, it does work, as you can see. If I come over here and try to press enter, it doesn't send the message, but clicking on the button does. I want to fix that. And in order to fix that, it isn't really that hard. All you have to do is you have to come here to the input which you're writing the message, and you need to put an on key press property like this. And then it takes in a function, and you can access the key that was pressed by just grabbing the event like this. And all we want to do is we want to basically ask a question. If the event dot key is equal to enter, then we want to call the send message function like this. So we're just asking a question. If the key that you pressed while working with your input is the enter key, then we want to call the send message button or the send message function, and it should send the message. So let's see if this works. If I come over here and I try to type something, I press enter, now the message goes through and it works perfectly. Now another thing I want to add to this chat is basically the ability to like scroll down whenever you write a message. So like if you receive a message, you will automatically scroll down so you can have an actual conversation without having to scroll down whenever you have more messages. So to do that, I'm actually going to be using a library in React. You can see we are inside of the client folder. So I'm just going to say npm install, and I'm going to use this library over here, React scroll to bottom. I found it a couple months ago and it's actually really nice, so I'd recommend using it. It is perfect for this scenario. And as you can see, it just finished installing. And if I close this and come here at the top, inside of our chat.js file, I'm just gonna import scroll to bottom from the scroll to bottom React scroll to bottom library. And then all this does is you wrap like a component around with this. So like for example, we have the message list, right? So wherever you have a list inside of that you're mapping through, you just wrap this around with the scroll to bottom. You set a height, you give some CSS to it, like set a specific height that you want. In our case, the CSS is being handled inside of here, and if you see, the name of the class name is message container, the one that I chose. So all you have to do is you have to come over here to the scroll to bottom, give it a class name, and make it equal to message container. And this will handle it perfectly. You can see that if I come over here and I join again, let me say PedroTech, and I'll put room 123, join the room, let me say Jake 123, and if I type something over here like hey, and over here I type what's up, and I say more stuff like more stuff. Oh, I forgot to remove the what's up, but yeah, if I keep putting things over here, you should see that it will automatically scroll down for us, which is amazing, and it won't break anything like it was doing, like the messages won't overflow, and it will work perfectly, as you can see. Now the final thing I really want to add to this chat tab is basically the ability to, whenever you click, like whenever you're writing something and you enter and send a message, I want the input to be clear, and that is very simple to do. Currently we have our input over here, right, and its value, it's equal to whatever we're writing, right? So we have a state representing its current value called current message. So what we can do is we can just set the value of this to be equal to the current message state, which right now won't do anything technically because the value is like the current stage is represented by the value. We set the current stage, the current message to be equal to the value. So this over here will just keep it the same. You can write on the input and it will change the values accordingly. However, what this does is we now have control and full control of the actual value of the input if we change the state. So if I come over here at the top and after I like send a message, I just say something like set current message to an empty string, then the value of the input will also clear up. And if I come here and I try to, I don't know, just try to type something and press enter, you should see it actually clears up. I can do this how many times I want and it will perfectly work. Now, yeah, that was the last thing I was gonna add for this tutorial. And you can see that this will work as well if the message is huge, by the way. You can see it will like, this is basically what will happen. This is basically it for this tutorial. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting 2 to 3 times a week and I would massively appreciate it. I actually really enjoy doing this tutorial. I really like doing this chat app. And if you're interested in seeing more videos, just subscribe and keep an eye on to whatever I post. I'm probably going to release a second episode where I just do add more like complicated stuff to it. And if you're interested in seeing that, then feel free to do so. But yeah, the code is in the description. Check it out. If you have any feedback, just leave it in the comments, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and I see you guys next time.